My name's Jaime. Today's the last day of my first year as a PhD student at the Center for Complex Systems, where Mike and Joe are my supervisors. Thank you. And today I'll be talking about theory of mind in mixed motive collective action. And I'll begin by unpacking some of these terms in the title, so that we can all make sense of what I'm talking about. So one thing that I think about a lot and that motivated me to pursue a PhD is, why can't we all just get along? You know, we have so much talent in the world. We could work together towards such amazing things, but we don't. We compete. We have private property, intellectual property, all these things that are so complicated, social dilemmas. And one example that is very interesting to think about is the tragedy of the commons, where a finite resource such as a meadow is accessed by a number of agents that have unlimited access to this resource. And if they were to restrain themselves from using the resource to preserve it, it would be irrational because other agents might use the resource and then they'll be left out without them using it. So the rational thing to do is to use it, and so do others, and then there's this sort of domino runoff effect where the resource gets depleted, and so the theory goes, no one gets to enjoy it anymore. Now, humans obviously have come up with ways to circumvent this problem. Mike spoke about norms, institutions, social structures at the cultural level. We also have things like trust and reciprocity and even shame and guilt at the sort of maybe psychological, evolved, evolutionary level that we use to cope with these sort of dilemmas. And just to clarify, these dilemmas involve as individuals deciding whether we want to cooperate or in some sense compete against the rest, right? And the larger the group is, the more difficult it is to coordinate our behavior. One psychological ability that is very advantageous in these sorts of situations is that of theory of mind. Theory of mind is our ability to, based on observing the behavior of others, infer what underlying cognitive processes cause that behavior. What hidden mental states made them behave the way they did. Things like what beliefs, what desires, what intentions, what knowledge caused that behavior. And as I said, this ability is critical to our ability to understand each other, to communicate, to cooperate, but even to compete against each other, because it's very strategically advantageous to be able to figure out what others are thinking or what they desire and so on. So if we want to understand these systems and these problems, these social dilemmas, it'd be advantageous for us if we could model them in simulation with agent-based modeling, for example, but our current agent-based models don't have a sophisticated theory of mind implementation. So we'll look at how we might be able to do this. Right, so I'll try to expand as a reverse onion from the core out in complexity, so that we can think about what challenges arise from trying to model these systems. So for a single agent, how do we model a single agent acting in the world? A minimal model is from expected utility theory in economics, where agents have to choose, have to make choices under uncertainty so as to maximize some notion of utility. We spoke about utility earlier as well. This utility is not a well-defined function that you can just look into someone's head and see, right? It's something that people behave as if they had, and that's what revealed preference theory says. But in any case, it helps us encode behavior in a way that sort of we can explain in a more compact way. If we extend this in time, we have the problem of rational planning. Agents act in the environment so as to change the state of the environment, and in doing so, they observe the state and they think of different actions to take. So in a reciprocal way, they end up in this loop where states inform actions, actions change states. And this can be modeled as a Markov decision process with well-defined sets. and transition probabilities between states given an action has been taken. And the notion of utility is encoded as a reward function that is driven by what state and what action you take. Agents learn a policy that tells them what action to take based on the state. But another layer of complexity, we could either say, what if we don't know the actual state of the environment? What if there's partial observability? So agents observe something about the environment, maybe visually, maybe auditorily, maybe somehow else, and they have to infer the true state that underlies that observation. And so this entails the notion of beliefs. We don't know exactly what the state is, but we could have an idea, distribution over the state. And agents may use a generative model that combines observations and states and space, right? That's the natural thing to do in this case. However, if the state space is very large and very complex, it might be intractable to find the posterior. So a solution is to go from inference to optimization, from an intractable posterior to a surrogate distribution, a recognition distribution Q here that approximates this posterior. Just with the notion of KL divergence from the definition, very simple manipulation, we can end up with this form at the bottom, 3 terms. We can rearrange in the next slide. And we can see that because the KL divergence could be 0, the blue term on the left could be seen as an upper bound on surprisal for the information theorists in the room, or negative log evidence, referring to Bayesian model evidence for the Bayesians in the room. So ideally, we choose a Q function, a Q distribution, a surrogate distribution, to minimize this upper bound to find the appropriate distribution. So this is what is known as the free energy principle that Mike talked about a little bit earlier. And a corollary of this principle is active inference. Active inference agents act in the environment with the intention, it seems like they try to maximize model evidence for a model of the environment that they have. And they do so by updating their beliefs, which parameterize this surrogate distribution. This going back to the free energy principle, we can find an equivalent form that has an expected utility term that refers to the model, and an entropy term that refers to the belief distribution. And this is very neatly aligns with the belief, desires, and intentions model from computer science, where we perceive the environment, we update our beliefs based on our perception of the environment, and then in conjunction with our beliefs, with our desires and beliefs, we plan ahead of time to choose what actions to undertake. Back one, yes. Now, the active part of active inference is about choosing what actions to take in time. So we think ahead of time and we try to minimize the notion of free energy in the future. So this entails the notion of expectations over beliefs and what actions to take and so on. Now, to summarize this first section, agents are defined by their Markov blankets. So their internal states are conditionally independent of their external states given the blanket states, what they perceive and how they act. And so this gives us a very tight description of an agent based on the perception-action loop, which defines the agent by a model, their beliefs, and their intentions with relation to minimizing a free energy of some sort. What if there's another agent in the environment? When there's 2 agents, first we need to be able to at least perceive another before we can act with another. And so when there's another agent in the environment, they themselves are changing the state of the environment, but they have a hidden state to us, which is their beliefs, right? So we need an algorithmic approach to model or to predict their internal states from behavior. So inverse reinforcement learning is one such algorithmic way to do so. Mike and I published a review paper recently on how inverse reinforcement learning could be an algorithmic basis for theory of mind. And IRL, inverse reinforcement learning, is given demonstrations of behavior, and a model of the environment. We want to find an approximation of the reward function that would have brought that behavior about. So one example that I wanted to highlight with relationship to, or in relation to the free energy principle is variational IRL, where they want to approximate not the reward function, but a distribution of reward functions given the data, and obviously they do so by maximizing the evidence lower bound, which is equivalent to the free energy, minimizing the free energy. And so reward, again, can be seen as a latent representation of behavior of some agent. So for the observer, the hidden state is the reward of the actor. The behavior of the actor is the observation of the observer, and we try to infer an intractable posterior with the same thing that we talked about before. When both agents can act on the environment, it's a bit different as well, because they both change the state of the environment, and they both have to model each other's hidden states. So you get things like, infinite regress, like I think what you think that I think, or those sorts of things. It's very complicated, very quick. But there's active inference papers that talk about this sorts of dynamics, and they show that when in cooperative settings with perceptual learning, models tend to converge. There's things like belief resonance and interactive inference. So it really talks to the notion of how the models of the agents converge with each other as they interact in time in a cooperative setting. Mike talked about this. Free energy can be related to game theory through the free utility. As a pointer to that sort of work. But in the interest of time, I'm moving to the final section, which is what happens when there's more than two agents. And here, we've talked about Markov decision processes. When we have more than two agents, it's usually Markov games that we talk about. But we need to consider things beyond the hidden state of agents. We have things like their relationship. Maybe there's hierarchies between them. So there's topologies in networks and things like that. So not only we have the infinite regress of what you think that I think, and so on, but we also have what he thinks that she wants that I do or something. So it's very, very complicated, very quick. And we have limited local observations in the network. So what we could do, and what we do as people, is coarse grain, right? We often look at groups, especially large groups, as collections of smaller groups, coalitions. We also infer based on identity and cues of people to think about what group do they belong to and what sort of beliefs or desires does that group have. And that helps us infer their individual behavior based on more coarse-grained features. So we should be able to do theory of mind at different levels, like what do we want, or what do they believe? And one particular work that I think could be applicable here, that's what I'm working on to draw this connection, is that of composable team hierarchies, where in a Markov game, they've come up with 3 operations where you can replace the game with a different game that's equivalent to the original game minus some agents. You can look at best response, so assuming that 2 agents are competing against each other, or look at joint planning, assuming that 2 or more agents are collaborating with each other. So this allows you to coarse grain through the Markov game and simplify the dynamics of the game. And if we can use that for a theory of mind, it should help us simplify how we think about others. So to finalize, I'll summarize what I've talked about today. Active inference provides a framework for decision-making under uncertainty that may be or is applicable to collectives through changing the definition of a Markov bucket that we use. It hasn't yet been applied to mixed motive settings where we have to compete and cooperate and with larger groups. And for mixed motives for larger collectives, we may need a way to coarse grain for computational tractability. So in future work, I'll be working on how can we leverage composability towards multi-level active inference for coarse graining in strategic settings. Thank you for your attention, and thanks for sticking around for the last one.
Is there any question for Jaime?
Pizza.
Ask questions. Pizzas haven't arrived yet.
Thanks, Mike.
So, when you think about coarse graining, what sort of coarse graining are you thinking about? Do you think cognitive coarse graining, or behavioural coarse graining, or attribute coarse graining within a group? What's the sort of coarse graining?
That's a good question. Yeah. So, in my mind, and in relationship to this work that we had up here, coarse graining is about. So there has to be some sort of notion of hidden states that apply across different people. So for instance, if you're playing a game of basketball, you can assume that those 5 people desire to put the ball this way, whereas these 5 people desire to put the ball that way. So that helps you coarse grain over the people, right? So I think that what I'm thinking is more in that sense, in that you should be able to attribute hidden states to a group, despite the hidden states actually being inside each people's heads.
So it's about shared collective states in some sense.
Yes, yeah. I think that's what I'm thinking. But there's definitely other ways that you could interpret coarse graining in these settings.
Yeah. And through that last minute, you get computational efficiency. Is that good?
You would hope. That's what I'm hoping. But also, going back to the infinite regress, if you have 2 people in a room, you already have infinite regress, but if you have coarse graining, you not only have the person layer modeling each other, but the infinite number of groupings you could do within a group, right? So you could have us 3, and then them 2 and I, and us 2 and them. And so it actually increases the state space in some way. So there's this dichotomy here that I'm still working through. But
we don't really want to be economists about this.
Would not.
We could be psychologists.
Yes, let's be psychologists about it. Thanks, Mike.
I don't know if it's related. I was thinking this idea of forming groups and thinking how it works in other species. Because if you think about bees, it's still complex, but it could be also the idea of a pipeline, how they communicate ideas. I've seen videos of how they would communicate, this is a spot for sunflowers, and how they all waggle their tail and turn into a certain direction, and able to communicate the direction from the hive to the flowers and back. So it's I wonder if it's worth trying to apply this type of methods in other species, which maybe it's a bit easier to understand, or try to find tractable ideas to look at, rather than humans, where it's as you said, it's so complex. What am I thinking? What are you thinking? Or how are we thinking about each other and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. And it goes back to the fact that we always think of individuals at the phenotypic reproductive level, right? But I know that for instance, David Krakauer and others have done work on the information theory of the self. So what does it mean to be a self, right? Is an ant colony a self, or is an ant a self, or is it both? And I think that really speaks to that. And going back to the Markov blanket, where do you draw the boundary of what it is to think or to interpret the world, and how you process that information from the outside in, but also within it.
Can I just say one thing about that?
Yeah.
So the talk we did today with Kathy on liquid versus solid brains is trying to do the alternative perspective of it, which is to say that if you've got a solid brain, it seems like Markov brain is very straightforward. But a liquid brain, where it's an ant colony or bee colony, the bees and ants don't themselves have any sense of theory of mind. It's all coded directly in the genes. But they behave dynamically in a whole in some way which is more closely resembling what we can think of as a cognitive system And so where we draw computational boundaries between self and other is a really open question that we're hanging carefully.
Okay, there was a question.
Another question about co-authoring. And so, is it the co-authoring procedure going to be an evolving procedure, or is it going to be a state where it is like predefined, or that's a question.
That's a very good question as well. In the paper, the original paper that proposes this composable team hierarchies, they do Bayesian inference on the team hierarchy itself. So they come up with almost like what Oscar was saying about, you come up with different models that could apply to the data, and in this case, the models will be compositional operations of replacing and cooperation competition. So with different combinations, you have different models, and then you do Bayesian model selection based on that. So given a situation, you might have some data coming in, and you have to infer what team hierarchy is most appropriate for responding to that behavior or inferring that mental state.
And as the procedure, as Ruiz said, yes, the product state already involved in the course grading.
Well, the way I see it is coarse graining could be a way to make this mental state inference tractable for more than one people. So if you have to infer the mental state of everyone in this room, I'm not going to be thinking, oh, she's bored, he's hungry. I'm thinking, well, maybe all of us want to have pizza very soon.
You don't have to point at me.
No, you can say all of us want to have pizza very soon, as opposed to think about everyone in the room. I think that's what I'm thinking.
Not a question, but just a comment. Many of these ideas that you have rolled out about particular identity from group membership, they are of course discussed at great length in international relations and the behavior of leaders as a function of the membership of the society of computation. So less mathematical, but the same.
Yeah, it's always nice to ground it back on reality. So I appreciate the comment.
There was one question from Harry.
Yeah, about the infinite regression, do you expect a fractal-like or scale-free nature in that could help you approach this?
Actually, maybe Mikhail could answer that one. There's been some work in our group that looks at sort of almost an attenuation parameter, so that the further into the regress you go, the less it counts towards your model update in a way. So you could say, and in economics we have level K modeling, so you always assume that everyone else is one level below your level of modeling. That helps simplify or stop that infinite regress.